Earth on Daf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph, page 39a. So I was looking over this previous Gemara, and it's a little a different style than we're used to. It's not the typical back and forth of a Gemara. It was basically Rava telling us something about the way Hilchasa Gibarasa. There's something about halachas that could be learned from the way people are noyeg halal. And so what comes out is that there's a way things used to be done, which was when people were more ignorant. And then there's the way things were done in Rava's time, where they tried to keep some of the previous minhag so that they remembered what the certain halachas which affected the previous minhag were. They wanted to they kept certain things, even though in Rava's time there was no need to, but they kept them, which allowed them to remember certain halachas, and that's why the minhag became that way in Rava's time. And then the minhag that we do, which is different. What do I mean? Well, basically, the way the minhag was that people didn't know halal. They didn't have sidurim. They weren't so familiar with it. So the way it originally is that one person said halal for everyone. How exactly the other people did it? Well, the understanding of the way we learned the Gemara with Rashi's interpretation was that the way other people did it, the way it was done was you basically repeated the Roshei Prakim, the beginning of the paragraph with the Chazan. And that would be Hoidu Lashem Ki Tov Kili Olam Chastei, that you would repeat. It's a mitzvah to reply with the Roshei Prakim, the beginning of the paragraph. And then the rest of it, you would say the entire time, Hallelujah. That was the original minhag. People didn't know Hallel. They would just say Hallelujah the whole time. Okay, at the beginning of each paragraph, they would repeat the wording of that paragraph, of that beginning. But other than that, it was basically Hallelujah. Every few words, the congregation would say Hallelujah. The guy who knew it would say the whole thing, and everyone else would be Yaitza. And now, in Rava's time, people didn't really need that. However, they wanted to remember certain halachas about halal. And so in Rava's time, they did it. They didn't do the whole thing, Hallelujah. Everyone said the whole thing. But certain things, they actually they kept up that minhag. And that's what Rava tells us, that Hilchasa Gibarasa Ikala Mishma, there's big halachas that we could learn from the minhag that we say halal today in Rava's time when he was speaking in his day. There are minhagim that we see from the way they say it in Rava's time. And it showed them how the original source was. What would they do in Rava's time? Rava's time, they would say the whole halal themselves. But certain things, they kept up that minhag. What things? So the first Hallelujah, they would say Hallelujah. And Hallelu Avdei Hashem, they would say Hallelujah. That was it. Then Hoidul Hashem Ki Tov, they would repeat. And so certain things they kept. Again, they didn't say Hallelujah the whole time. They said the first time, Hallelujah, Hallelu Avdei Hashem. Why did they do that? So Rava keeps telling us each thing. Hallelujah, the first one, it's a mitzvah to say Hallelujah. When they would start Hallel, they would say Hallelujah. And even if a person was a bucky, they would. There was a minhag that was the Inyan. Even someone who knew Hallel, he would say Hallelujah, and that was the way they started Hallel. And we mentioned Tosfos as well. I believe on Friday we mentioned Tosfos about the bracha. If they would say, would they would wait for the Chazan to say Hallelujah. They would say their bracha before. But then they would wait for the Chazan to say Hallelujah, and Tosfos says it's not a hefsek, it's not a problem. And then they would respond to the Chazan Hallelujah. They would say Hallelujah, and then they would say Hallelu Avdei Hashem. Now, why did they do that? Again, in the time of the Gemara and Mishnah, the time of the Mishnah and before, they would actually they would say much more than this. They would say Hallelujah every time. But here, in the time of Rava, they would just say Hallelujah a second time by Hallelu Avdi Hashem. Why? So because they would learn from there Imhaya Gadol Makra Oisai Aina Achrav Hallelujah, that if someone is being mitzi someone else, you would say Hallelujah. In other words, that was the lesson, that you don't have to say every word, that you're yaitza with Hallelujah. So they fulfilled. So number one was a mitzvah to say Hallelujah at the beginning of Hallel, that everyone would say it, or the whole congregation would answer Hallelujah together. And then the second thing is that if a person is an adult, is being mitzi, you don't have to say every word. You just say Hallelujah, and that would be yaitza. And that halacha could apply later if someone doesn't know Hallel. They could just say Hallelujah, which is an interesting halacha, I guess. I haven't seen anyone do this, but imagine if someone is a Baal Tshuva and they can't read the whole Hallel. So maybe this might be an option for them. But the only problem would be is that the Chazan doesn't say every word. But if the Chazan would say out loud every word, you could have such an option. Imagine if I could imagine in a Chabad house, there might be such an option where the whole community is basically learning how to daven, and they're not up to saying everything. So the Chazan, the Shliach, would say the whole Hallel, and to tell them, every time I lift up my hand, say Hallelujah or something, or every place where I stop, say Hallelujah. And they would be yotzes. So that was the second thing. So again, in Rava's time, they only said it a second time, just to fulfill this inyan of the gadol is makra, the adult is saying it, he's having your mind. You just got to say Hallelujah. Now, what was the third halacha in Rava's time that you could see? That is interesting. They repeated Hoidul Hashem Ki Tov. Why? Why did they say Hoidul Hashem Ki Tov Ki Le'olam Chas? Why the congregation answer Hoidul Hashem Ki Tov Ki Le'olam Chas? Because it's a mitzvah to say the Rashi Prakim in the beginning of the paragraph. So they did that, and then there was an inyan of Ana Hashem Hoishiana, and people, the congregation would say Ana Hashem Hoishiana. Why did they do that? So on this, and this was another little discussion. It was teaching a different halacha, that this is not a Rashi Prakim. Why are you repeating the sentence that the Chazan says? And it's not a full sentence, it's only a partial sentence. The reason is because it's also teaching you that there are some times that you don't say the whole, that you need to say every word. When is that? If a child is being mitzi you. A child can't be mitzi you. So the only thing you do, if you have a child saying the Hallel, he can't be mitzi you. He can't fulfill your obligation, but you could repeat after him word for word. That was the fourth halacha. And then came the fifth halacha, Ana Hashem Atzlichana, and that the congregation would say Ana Hashem Atzlichana. Again, we're not talking about doubling, really, that you would say both, but we are doubling because you're listening to the Chazan and you're saying it once. That's called doubling to some extent. And the reason why they would do this Chazan saying it, you're yaitza when you hear the Chazan, you're fulfilling the obligation when you hear the Chazan, and then you say it your time, which is, you could call it a second time, even though you're only saying it once, but you were yaitza already from the Chazan, now you're saying it yourself on Hashem Atzlichana. So here it teaches you this concept that the Mishnah had said, if a person wants to repeat words in Hallel, you're allowed to. Very interesting thing, that you're able to be kaifel, the double, the likful kaifel. If you want to double a pasuk, you're able to. What's going through my mind is if this is specifically connected to this pasuk of Ana Hashem Aishiana, Ana Hashem Atzlichana, because this pasuk was recited by two different people. It was recited by the brothers of, one pasuk was recited by the brothers of David, the other pasuk was recited, the other half of the pasuk was recited by David. So was that the reason Probably not, because it seems to be a saying that in general, if you want to repeat things in Hallel, you're allowed to. So what it seems like is not necessarily based on that. It just seems because these are all honorable praises to Hashem, you're allowed to repeat it. Anyway, that's the fifth halacha, and the sixth halacha was that Baruch haba and b'shem Hashem, and that Shemeya is ka'ina, that if you hear it's as if you said it. So these were the things that they did in Rava's Hallel. How different is Rava's Hallel than our Hallel today? Well, one thing is different. We don't all start Hallelujah. We don't listen to the Chazan say Hallelujah and then we say Hallelujah. We don't do that. The Chazan says Hallelu Avdei Hashem. We don't answer Hallelujah, so we don't do the second thing. The third thing of Haidul Hashem Ki Tov, we do repeat Haidul Hashem Ki Tov Ki Li'olam Chaste. That we repeat. And not because of mitzvah lanos rashi aprakim. I don't think that's the reason. I think it's simply because we talk about repeating things in Hallel. Now, Ana Hashem Mashiach, Ana Hashem Mashiach, that we do listen to the Chazan say Ana Hashem Mashiach, and we answer Ana Hashem Mashiach. We actually do it twice. In Rava's time, they only did it once. So that's another difference. The Ana Hashem Atzlichana as well, we do it twice. We listen to the Chazan and we say it, which ends up being that it's like 4 times each of these, because you listen to the Chazan and then you say it yourself. And then Baruch haba b'shem Hashem, we say that whole thing. So most of what Rava did, that minhag that was done by Rava's time, we don't really follow. Almost all of those halachas are not followed today. But in Rava's time, there seems to have been such a minhag to remember the minhag of the Rishonim, of the original minhag of Hallel. Again, in today's day and age, everyone is expected to know Hallel, to know how to say Hallel, to read it. And they even have transliteration probably of Hallel. So you could even read it in English letters. And so bottom line is we don't really follow Rava's thing, but the Gemara tells us an interesting minhag, which was based on remembering the original minhag and certain halachas that were learned, which really teaches us that certain minhagim were established to teach us certain halachas. That's why they made certain minhagim. It really shows us an interesting, like how they specifically customized the minhag in order to teach the people in Rava's day these halachas. So that was the previous Gemara, and again, it's not really something we often find, that minhagim changed so drastically, and how they developed minhagim based on reminding us of certain halachas. But anyway, that's the statement of Rava. 6 halachas they taught through the minhag that was done in Rava's time. Now, the Gemara, yes, Ezra.
Okay, so I'm looking at the Hallel, and is it the reason why, for example, after all the ones we normally say during Chatzi Hallel, the last word is Hallelujah?
So that's part of the Tehillim. It's not like we're adding any Hallelujah. Now the Hallelujah that we're talking about here is really adding Hallelujah to the extent that they would say Hallelujah 123 times. That's what it would add up to be, 123 times. Keneged the years of Aaron HaKoyin, the years that Aaron lived, was 123 times, and there was some pasuk. I think it's in Yushalmi. It's brought up something like this. I think I saw quoted that there was that was the original minhag. People didn't know Hallel, and everyone basically would just listen to the Hallel that was said by the Chazan, and you would just say Hallelujah 123 times, every half sentence. So So that now the Hallelujah that we have at the end of the certain paragraphs, that's part of the paragraph. That's not the Hallelujah that we're talking about here. So so it definitely is a different minhag. You know, even Rava's minhagim were very different than ours. For sure, the original minhag of not again, you could see this in Rashi. Rashi that goes through this whole thing. He it's on the top of page 38a on the top line. He says, from this that we're noyeg in Bate Knesiyos, like it explains, and we say the you know the Hallel with the the way it's said. So there, you know, this is not the way that it was done. This is not the original Hallel that they would say Hallelujah al kol davar on everything. And Rava says the minhag from now we can learn what the Iker Kriyas Hallel when they originally established it, because Hakol Chayovin Bikriyasi, everyone is obligated to say, but not everyone is able to. They're not bucky to say it. So they established the original minhag was someone said it and everyone just heard it and everyone would answer something. They would call in mitzas, some of it. And now in the Bate Knesset, all the Bnei Knesset Seino are Buckies, Rava is saying. In other words, in Rava's day, everyone is a Bucky, and they read the whole thing. Nevertheless, we do say twice Hallelujah. We do say Hoidul Hashem double repeated. We do Ana Hashem Ana repeated. And so you see, it teaches us what the original takana was when they established Hallel, to say Hallel. Again, Hallel is a rabbinic law, and how was it established to be said? So that's basically this Gemara. Now, the Gemara leads us right into the next question, which is that they wanted to know, well, what happens if you didn't say anything? You just listened, which does make sense. It comes from, once you learn this whole Gemara about how they would do it, and it was, you know, really fulfilled through Shemea Koine, and that's how you fulfill it. Do you really need to answer Hallelujah? And what happens if you didn't? So he asked him, what happens if you didn't say? So he says that Chakimaya, Safraya, Reshi Amma, Dershaya, all of these rabbinic authorities said, if you heard it, you didn't answer, you fulfilled the obligation. And then on Friday, we went into a little, why does it, we tried to, we found in the back of some of the commentaries that it says, why did it go through all these names of Safraya, Chakimaya, and Safraya, Reshi Amma. And one of the commentaries had mentioned that the Chakmaya, they are Chachamim, but they're not Nevoinim, and therefore they don't know, they know how to listen well, but maybe they're not capable of creating their own insights, and they might feel depressed about that. So we learn here, no, you're Yaitse Shomer Ka'ina, you listen, you come to the Shir and you listen, even though you don't really come up with your own insights, you're still fulfilling the mitzvah. And then Safraya, the people who teach children as well, they might think, oh, look, we're spending so much time teaching children, we don't have time to really develop our own learning. And this lesson teaches them Shama, even though you're just listening. Oh, because you're even listening to you're not even saying the words of Torah. These teachers, they're letting the kids say the words. They're letting the kids speak, and so they're not even learning Torah the whole time. So you might think they're not really fulfilling the mitzvah. And on that it says, no, Shama v'lo yotze, you're listening, you're yotze, they're Talmud Torah that the kids are doing. You're actually fulfilling your mitzvah, and so on and so forth. The what's the other terms that are used? The Chakimaya, the Reishei Amma and Darshaya as well, that the people who are listening are fulfilling the obligation. The Reishei Amma are the leaders, and the Darshaya are the speakers, the Darshanim, the public speakers. So on these as well, it's teaching them that they should know that the other people are fulfilling their mitzvah of learning Torah through listening, and it's as if they said it themselves, and it's no less. They're equally fulfilling the mitzvah. Um, so the Reishei Amma are directing the people, and it's possible that other people are going to be jealous of them, that they're not involved. The leaders are the ones who's running the show, and they don't have this merit, and so they shouldn't be mafias the nation. They should appease the people that they are fulfilling the mitzvah also by them listening and fulfilling and keeping. And they also get great zchus by following orders, as if they themselves were the ones giving these orders. And if they didn't listen, no one would listen. And the darshanim as well, that people who come to listen, so they might say, we're not really fulfilling anything. The speaker is getting the mitzvah. We should learn Torah ourselves and not even come to this drasha. And on this, the darshanim should teach them that Shemea Ka'ina, they're fulfilling the mitzvah, they're getting the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. It's better they should come, and this way everyone listens and comes and participates. So that's why the Shemea Ka'ina, and again, the discussion that I'm sharing with you is based on this Gemara, that it says that Reb Chia bar Abba, he made a whole long statement out of this instead of just answering the question. Chakimaya, Sofraya, Reishei Amma, Dorshaya, all these people said Shemea Ka'ina, Shama V'layana Yatza, that Shemea is Ka'ina, that if a person hears something is Yaitza. Why do you say all these extra words? Because he's referring to specific situations where people might feel they need some therapy. They need to be calmed. They need to be convinced that what they're doing is right. All these people should realize that they are fulfilling the mitzvah to the highest level by listening and being yotza. Yes, Ezra.
No, I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. You up. If it comes, you can feel free to interrupt me. I'll try to let you in. Okay, so the next Gemara that we're up to, no, we actually did one more piece over here. We mentioned that how do you know this concept of Shemea Kohen, and we said it's basically this story of Yoshio Hamelech and the Kohen Gadol. At the time, he found the Beis Chilkiyo, Kohen Gadol. He found the Sefer Torah, and it was hidden in the days of Tasha, and ultimately they found, and it was opened up to a certain page, and so the Chazan, the Balkir, the Sefer, they had him read it. Shafan, he was the Sefer, he read it, and it was open to a certain place. There was the Toichacha, the rebuke. So they asked Hulda Hanavia what this meant, and Hulda the Navia, the prophetess, she said what it means is that ultimately the Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed, like the curses, like the rebuke says, but it's not going to happen now because you have humbled yourself to Hashem. Yeshua was a great king, which we're soon going to learn about in the Malachim, in Book of Kings. But anyway, the pasuk says over there that Yeshua read the Torah. Yeshua read it. Yeshua heard it. Why does it say Karan? Kara Yoshio, Kara Malch Yehuda says that the king of Yehuda read it. He didn't read it. Shaphan read it. So the Gemara understands it means that Shemea Ka'ina, he listened, and he's as if he said it, and maybe he also read it. The Gemara says it can't be. It says Shamacha, he heard it. He didn't read it. It was he heard it. It's considered as if he said it, but he heard it. And of this, there's really two ways of learning. That when you listen, is it exactly as if you said it, or is it considered as if you said it? If it's exactly as if you said it, it could have a problem in the middle of Shemona Esrei, where you're not supposed to interrupt, and you listen to the Chazan say Kadosh, 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 Kedusha, and you listen to him. You're in the middle of your Shemona Esrei, your private Shemona Esrei. You listen to him saying it. If it's as if you actually said those words, then you interrupted your Shemona Esrei with those words. That could be a problem. Taisa says, don't do that. Rashi says, no, it's not a problem, because Rashi understands it's not that you said the words. It's considered as if you said the words. We consider it, you get the merit as if you said, not that as if you actually verbalized those words. We consider it as if you verbalized the word, but not actually verbalizing the words. And therefore, in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei, you say, the Chazan says, Kedusha, you're allowed to listen and be yotzin. My understanding is that we follow Rashi's pshat over here. Okay, now the next Gemara is really what we're up to. Nope, we did that as well. Rava, because we got to 39a. Yeah, we did one more piece. Rava said a person shouldn't say Baruch haba and then and breathe and stop and then say B'Shem Hashem. Why? Because it seems like you're just saying Hashem's name in vain. You should say it together. Baruch haba B'Shem Hashem. That's a pasuk in hollow. Then the Gemara said. Then the Gemara said we skipped some words over there because it was seems like it's supposed to be a little later in the Gemara. So then we said Rava said that another statement. So he says this thing about not to say Baruch haba and then B'Shem Hashem, and also not to say Yehi Shmei Rabbah and then Mevarach. And what was the problem? The problem was that if you say it this way, you're not giving Hashem the full honor, and the whole world is like based on this honor. It stands on the honor of Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach. So if you stop over there and you breathe and you interrupt, so it's Yehi Shmei Rabbah, Hashem's great name. You stop and then you say Mevarach. It's almost like you're saying two separate things, and the whole world stands on the Yehi Shmei Rabbah. It's a very important praise to Hashem, and therefore Rava was very machmir not to interrupt. It's interesting because there's a discussion, and we learned it in the beginning of brachas, where it says, what does it mean Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach? So what does the word Rabbah mean? So one interpretation was Yehi Shmei, the name of Hashem, or Shem Yudke, the name Yudke, should be Rabbah, should be Elo exalted. The other way of learning it was Yehi Shmei Rabbah, the great name of Hashem should be Mevarach. So is Rabbah mean exalted? And that's what should happen to the name of Hashem, that the name of Hashem should become exalted, Rabbah? Or is it Yehi Shmei Rabbah, the great name of Hashem, Mevarach should be blessed? So does Mevarach go on the next sentence, Mevarach L'olam Ol Me'omai Yisparach? Or is it going on the back on the previous thing? Yehi Shmei Rabbah, the great name of Hashem, should be Mevarach. So
there's no pause between Rabbah and Mevarach.
Well, there could be.
It would be the second case.
That could be. Should be a pause.
So I don't see the first one. I see the second one.
Right.
Saying may his great name be exalted,
yeah.
may be blessed.
Right. May his great name, Rabbah means his great name. It doesn't mean it should be exalted. That's what you want to say. It means his great name, and then Mevarach should be blessed. The other way of learning it is Rabbah means not his great name. His Shem Yud-Kei is Shem, the Shmei. Shem Yud-Kei should be Rabbah, should be exalted. So Taisus, I think in the beginning of Brachas, he also agrees with you, Ezra, or you agree with him. He seems to want to disagree with that pshat. But this Gemara also seems to prove what you're saying as well. And that is, if that's the meaning, Yehi Shmei Rabbah, and then you pause, then what's wrong with pausing? Our Gemara says don't pause after Rabbah. Now, if Rabbah means exalted, then it's not so bad. Yehi Shmei Rabbah, the name of Hashem should be exalted. What's so bad about that? That's Mevarach L'olam Ol Me'omai is afterwards. Okay, you didn't say the full thing. It would seem like our Gemara is a little proof to this pshat in the. You have to look up and see if Taisus over there brings this Gemara, but it seems to make such a big deal out of it. Rava is making a big deal. Rav Safra argues and he says you don't have to make a big deal, but Rava seems to make a big deal. Yehi Shmei Rabbah, don't stop. Chas v'shalom, you have to say Mevarach. It sounds like he's understanding Mevarach to be part of the sentence. Now, Rav Safra argues. Rav Safra says, Moshe, you Gadol Hadar, you great Moshe Rabbeinu, you, you great person, but Shaper Kamred, is this correct what you're saying? Are you sure what you're saying? Are you convinced that this is right? What you have in mind to finish it? Okay, you interrupted, you took a breath, you stopped for a second, for a moment. Obviously not a long stop, but a small moment that you said, oh, chas v'shalom, you have to say it bahadodi, you have to say it right away. No, suke milsahu, you're finishing your sentence. But less one, but it's not a problem. Not a problem. You're finishing your sentence. So that's the Gemara about Yeheshme Rabbah. So it seems like Rabbah and Mavarach go together. Mavarach is a continuation, as Ezra just told us, and I think it's somewhat of a proof from this Gemara. But I think Tosfos as well felt that was the correct pshat, and he argued maybe on, I don't know who his source was, but it was right in the beginning of Tractate Brachas. I'll have to take a look and find it over there. The beginning pages of the bottom, one of the bottom of the page, and maybe Daf Gimel or Dollar maybe. Okay, so we're now going to start the new Gemara, and the new Gemara is going to be discussing the next case in the Mishnah. The Mishnah was on page 38a. 38a, the Mishnah had said that a place where the minhag is to double it, you double it. Place the minhag is not to double halal, you don't double halal. That's what the Mishnah said. We learned Rashi's pshat over there. And Rashi says the place where the minhag is to double the entire halal, kol pasuk, all the psukim, you should do so. If that's your minhag, that's the minhag of the place. And he says the reason why they have such a minhag is because chapter 118 of halal is repeated. So therefore, we should repeat chapter 114 and chapter 115, chapter 116, chapter 117. All of those chapters we should repeat because chapter 118 is repeated, part of halal, and it's a lot of repetitious psukim in chapter 18. And because of that, you repeat the other chapters of halal, if that's the minhag. It was a minhag. The basis of that minhag was if chapter 118 is very repetitious, so you could repeat the other psukim and the other chapters. That's what it seems like. So he leaves it a little vague if he means to include the end of chapter 18 is not. The end of chapter 118 is not doubled. And he leaves it a little vague. He says, that is not doubled in the actual verses. And he says, and that's what it means in the Gemara. If you want to Maisif Likval ulamata, that one of the rabbis would double that as well. So the question is, when the Mishnah says you would double it, a place where the minhag is to double it, you should double it. Is that referring also to the end, or is that only the Gemara mentioning that? And the Mishnah doesn't mean that. The Mishnah just means the first few chapters, 114, 115, 116, 117 of Tehillim. All those chapters of Tehillim that are recited during Hallel, those chapters you would repeat. So I'm just mentioning that Rashi leaves it a little vague, but it seems like he's saying that those are only those chapters and not the end of 118 where it's not doubled. That's not what our Mishnah is talking about. The Gemara mentions that, but the Mishnah really is not referring to that. That's what it seems like from Rashi. That's my understanding of Rashi, that those, not only it's not doubled in the verse, but the Mishnah's statement that they would double it is not there. It's not referring to that. The Mishnah's statement of doubling it, my understanding is it's only chapter 114, 115, 116, and 117. And that's what the Mishnah says. If that's the minhag to do, you want to double it, you double it. What's the basis of that minhag? Because chapter 118 is 90% doubled. And therefore the other, they had a minhag to double they made a minhag to double the other psukim as well. They understood that to be like a lesson that we should double the rest, it seems like. Place the minhag is to not to double it. You don't yifshait, just do it simple. One time. And so the Gemara here, so we're on page 39a, and we're about 6 lines from the top of the page. Makam shenagu likbal, a place where the minhag is to double it. Tanya Rebbe taught. Rebbe taught in a brisa, kaifel ba dvarim, that you should double these. You should double. You should double things. Dvarim means things, meaning these verses. And what is he referring to? Kaifel ba dvarim, that you would double verses. He's talking about from Ana Hashem Hoshiyana. After that, you should you should also continue to double, because those psukim are not really doubled. Baruch haba b'shem Hashem is not doubled. Kel Hashem vayar lanu is not doubled. Keliyata v'oideka is not doubled. But Rebbe taught in a brisa kaifel badvarim, after you do the Ana Hashem, which is doubled, you should. He taught in a brisa to double that as well. Double the other, some of the verses at the end of 118 that are not doubled. He said you should double the final verses. Rabbi Elazar ben Parta, Moisef Badvarim, he would add things. He wouldn't just double the Kaifel Badvarim from Ana Hashem, but he was even Moisef things to double. What would he be Moisef? He added on other things to double. He would be Moisef also what Rebbe said to add on, to double. He was Moisef. He added on to that doubling other things. From where? My Moisef, the Gemara asks. Rabbi Moisef likbol me oidcha ulamata. He would add on from oidcha and from there and onward, which is a little before Ana Hashem Oshiyana. Basically, the Gemara that we just said now is mentioning that there are psukim at the end of chapter 118 of Tehillim that are not doubled. There are all the beginning verses are doubled. At the end, there's 2 little sections that are not doubled. Rebbe said the final section you should double. And Rebbe Eliezer ben Parta says, Rebbe Elazar ben Parta, he says you should double also that other little portion as well. Rebbe said the final portion you should double, and Rebbe Elazar ben Parta said that there's an area before the end that's also not doubled. That also you should double. So this is the conclusion, basically, of this Gemara, is that the Mishnah says a place where the minhag is to double the verses. The way Rashi's learning it, it means the beginning part of Hallel double. Rebbe comes along in a brisa. It tells us that you should say the final verses double. And Rebbe Elazar ben Parta says not only the final verses, but there's also a few verses. Oidcha Hashem. Ki ani sani vatili lishua even masu abayim haislu shpina. Hashem all those psukim, these psukim should be doubled. That's what Rabbi Elazar ben Parta wants to add. Now, according to the way we're learning it, the minhag that we have in all of our hallels, and I'm not 100% sure how it's done. I think Ezra mentioned to us in that Sephardic people. Did you mention on Friday that the Sephardim don't? I forgot what you mentioned. They don't double all the psukim. They only on Hashem. Do you double Baruch Haba? Do the Sephardim double Baruch Haba and Keliyata?
Everything's double unto up to and including Odula Hashem Kitov.
From the beginning of Hallel until Haidul Hashem Kitov? No. Up to the last Haidul. Oh, I see. Everything's doubled from Oidcha Hashem, Kiani Sani Vatilu, Shuav and Masu Abayim. Those are all doubled in Sephardic shows. And all the psukim are doubled. So it's the same as Ashkenaz then. We also double the end. Everything is doubled, but we don't double the beginning. So our Mishnah that says you place the minhag is to double it, don't double it, don't double it, sounds like we're not following the Mishnah's custom of doubling. We're only following the Gemara's custom, where Rebbe and Rabbi Elazar ben Parta. The other way of understanding it is that Rashi's pshat is disagreed upon by the Rambam. And the Rambam seems to understand, and this is based on, if you look in the chapter 3 of the Rambam in Laws of Hanukkah, he mentions that you should double at the end. And he says, Makam shenago lichbol yichbol. It sounds like he's explaining the Mishnah to be the same the same point that the Gemara is saying, meaning like Rebbe is explaining the Mishnah. Rebbe was Koifel Dvarim, and Rebbe Elazar ben Parta was Maisif, and they're both explaining the Mishnah. And so the way it seems like the way the Rambam is learning is that the Mishnah's meaning of Makam Shenago Likbal is not to double the beginning of Hallel, it's to double the end of chapter 118. And that's what the Mishnah is saying, and that our minhag is to follow that we follow the Mishnah. So it sounds like maybe we're following the Rambam's pshat, and that the Gemara is explaining the Mishnah rather than adding on to the Mishnah. The way Rashi learns it, sounds like the Gemara is adding on to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says double the beginning of Hallel, and the Rebbe and Rebbe Elazar ben Parta is saying double the end of Hallel. And according to the Rambam, the Gemara is just explaining that the Mishnah is saying that there's a minhag to double at the end of Hallel, and some don't. And the Gemara and we seem to follow this minhag of doubling at the end of Hallel. Okay, now comes the next Gemara. The next Gemara is that a place where the levarech yavarech, where the custom is to say the bracha for Hallel, you should say the bracha. Hakol kaminag amadina, everything follows the minhag of that place, of that country. So what does the Gemara say here? Levarech yavarech. Again, we're on page 39a. Levarech yavarech. We're about 12 lines from the top, maybe 10 lines from the top. David, are you able to tell us the page number in the in your Gemara?
Yeah, it's 189.
189.
Yeah.
Avram, if you're able to, if you're there, page 189. We're starting another little piece right before the Mishnah. So it says, Levarech yavarech, the place where the custom was to say a bracha, you should say that bracha for Hallel. So Amar Abai lo yishanu ela la'acharav. So Abai says, this, what we're talking about, is talking about la'acharav, after the Hallel, the blessing at the end of Hallel. Avalafanav, but before Hallel, mitzvah levarech, it's an obligation to say a bracha. After Hallel, maybe it's a minhag. Halucha, that's a minhag, but before it, to say the command, that's a mitzvah to say a bracha. That's not a minhag. The Amar of Yehuda, Amar of Shmuel, call them mitzvahs. All mitzvahs, kulan mevarach alein. You always have to say a bracha on them. Oiver las yasan. Now, oiver las yasan means before you do them. That all brachas are supposed to be recited before. If you finish the mitzvah, you can no longer say the bracha. If you're in the middle of the mitzvah, maybe then you could say it still. Really supposed to say it before. But all the mitzvahs that you do, you're supposed to say it oiver las yasin. Now, what does oiver really mean? Oiver literally just means to pass over. But normally, Rashi says here it means koidem, before. Oiver las yasan means before you do it. So the Gemara asks, so my mashma the high oiver, and how does it imply from this word oiver to mean ikdume, that before it you should say, that it means that you should say a bracha before the mitzvah. Any mitzvah that you do, you're supposed to say a bracha before it. Why? How does that fit with the word oiver? Oiver las yasin. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok says the chsiv. It says in the pasuk Vayar Achimatz derech hakikar, that Achimatz Vayoratz. What did I say? Vayoratz Achimatz derech hakikar. Vayavar es hakushi. Achimatz went the way of the kikar, some type of a piece of land, a kikar, or like a valley or a meadow, maybe. And he passed through the kikar, and he was able to reach David HaMelech before the Kushi. We learned this in Shmuel Beis, that he was telling David HaMelech that his son Avimelech was killed, and which Avimelech was making a whole Avshalom. What did I say? Avshalom, his son Avshalom. Excuse me. His son Avshalom. Yes, my mashka hasn't weared off from Purim. His son Avshalom was making a whole rebellion against David HaMelech, and so this Achimatz thought he was doing a good thing. He was going to go and tell David HaMelech real fast about that the rebellion is over. Avshalom has been killed. So Achimatz ran there before the Kushi, who was the one who was supposed to go there. Achimatz went. Now, so what does it mean? By Yavor as a Kushi, it means he went there before the Kushi. He got there before the Kushi. Abaye Yomer Mehach. Abaye says from another pasuk. It says V'hu Avar Lefneim. It says, and he passed by before them, which means Yaakov went before his family when they were passing by Esav. He went first. Who Avar Lefneim, and he went before them, in front of them. He went in front of them. He passed in front of them. So it means that he went first. So Avar sometimes means first. You see it. And V'bayasema Mehachan, if you want, you could say from this pasuk that what? Vayavor Malcolm Lefneim Hashem Barosham. This is about the time when Mashiach comes. That the Melech HaMashiach is going to go before them, and Hashem will be in front of everyone. So Oiver means before them, means in front of the Yidden. Melech HaMashiach is going to lead them, and Hashem will go in front of everyone. So that's the Yavor means before. And so here also, every mitzvah, the obligation is to do the mitzvah before you do the mitzvah. So the Gemara is explaining that the Mishnah says you go by the minhag, wherever the minhag is to do in that place, that's what you should do. Yeah, that's correct. You're supposed to go according to the minhag of the place. That means the final bracha. The first bracha is no minhag. The first bracha is an obligation. That bracha you have to do. There's no such thing as minhag over there. There it's an obligation. There everyone has to do it. Now comes the next Mishnah, page 39a. Halokeach lulav mechaverei. So now we're talking about the laws of lulav and esrog, and here we're talking about that you want to buy a esrog from your friend who's an am haaretz, and you're buying it on shmita. And Rashi over here says, near seems to me that lekeach lulav me'am haaretz garsinan. The word in the Mishnah we have is chaveroi, his friend. Friend normally means like a scholar, and so Rashi says it seems to me that the girsa should be me'am haaretz. The ha'am haaretz kamairi. We're going to be talking about an am haaretz here. You're buying it from someone who's what you would call an am haaretz, an ignoramus, someone who's just simple person who's maybe not so careful about the mitzvahs, about certain mitzvahs, and doesn't know them. So you wouldn't call an am haaretz chaveroi. So Rashi says that even though the Mishnah's word we have printed is chaveroi, it seems that the girsa should be am haaretz. Lekech lulav me am haaretz. So a person is buying a lulav from not from a scholar, but from an am haaretz. Now, if the Rashi says maybe it is talking about a chaveroi and am haaretz. Maybe the buyer and the seller are both am haaretz. Then it would work. They're friends. Chaveroi just means friend. So if we normally wouldn't call an am haaretz a friend of a scholar, but to say he's a friend of another ignoramus, that you could say. So maybe it's like keach lulav. You're buying a lulav me chaveroi from your friend who's also an am haaretz. Maybe they're both am haaretz. Then it would work. So Rashi says, no, that can't be, because if the buyer is also an am haaretz, why is he listening? Why is he going to be considering his friend to not, to be like suspectable of not doing the mitzvah? In other words, he thinks that his friend's all, if he's going to be careful, his friend is also careful. He's in the same boat as his friend. So Rashi therefore thinks that they're talking about a Talmud Chacham, a scholar, someone who's careful about mitzvahs, and he's buying it from an am haaretz. So it's a lekech lulav me'am haaretz, b'shviyas on shmita. So it says noisenloi, he should give him esrog b'matana, the esrog as a gift. So you buy the lulav and the hadassim and aravos. You're basically paying for those items, and he gives him the esrog as like, okay, and I'll throw in an esrog. And what's the reason? Because a Talmud Chacham, a person is not allowed to buy for money on Shemitah produce, and which we'll see in the Gemara. But that's basically what we're dealing with, is buying Shemitah produce from an Am Haaretz. So you should tell the person who's buying it, he should ask him that the answer, listen, you want to sell me the esrog for $20 and the lulav for $5 and the hadassim for $5 and the aravos for 10. You're selling me all this for altogether $40. Do me a favor. I'll buy the lulav with the hadassim and aravos $40. The esrog give me for free. So it's basically giving him the same amount of money, but he's telling him, but the esrog will be like a bonus. You just give it to me. This way, he's not buying the Shemitah fruit. Instead, he's getting it as a gift. Now, the Gemara says, Loi ratza litin, like what happens if the Am Haaretz doesn't want to give it to him b'matana as a gift? I don't know why. He's going to get the same money. But he doesn't want to give it to him as a gift. Mahu. How could you, what would be another way of doing it? So Amar Rav Huna, Mavliya leid me esrog belulav. He says, there is another way to do it. You want me to pay $10 for this, $20 for that, and $5 for this, and $5. Listen, how much is the whole thing together? $40 for the whole package? I'll pay the package $40. I don't know individual stuff. Give me the package, $40. Give me the whole package. And that's called mavliya. You are including the money of the esrog. It's part of a havla. It's swallowed up in the total amount. This is a halacha that's applicable in Hilchos Shabbos sometimes, especially if you have girls that go babysitting, and the problem is, how do you babysit on Shabbos? You can't get paid. So the way it's not a simple thing to get paid for babysitting on Shabbos. Even though they're not doing any malacha, the work is no, but they're getting, it's called schar Shabbos. They're getting money for for babysitting, for working on Shabbos. They're getting money for what they're doing, even though it's not actual work. So the work is not prohibited.
Or leading groups on Shabbos. We used to have that with Pirchei, right?
Pirchei, if people get paid, if they get paid, yeah. So how do you do that? So there's a way of doing it that you're sort of getting paid for the meeting that you have before, and you're planning it, and you're going to the store to buy the stuff and whatever, or you're getting paid. You go a few times to babysit, so you just make a package. Okay, this month, you know what? For $100, I'll babysit for you for the month. And something like that, and you're basically including a few days in the week. It happens to be Shabbos, it's all included. Or something like that. It's havla. It's all included. You did for the month. Isaac, are you trying to speak? Oh. Okay. So it's called havla. So the Mishnah's case was you're doing it as a gift, and the Gemara says you basically you mavliya the demei esrog belulav, and you include it. So the Gemara says,
I think nowadays they do it the other way. They're always selling you an esrog and they throw in the lulav.
yeah. Yep. So the thing that I'm seeing Rashi over here seems to learn the way what it seems like in the Gemara is that the Mishnah's case was where he says, listen, sell me the lulav, give me the esrog free. He didn't up the money of the lulav. In the Gemara's case is, so he doesn't want to give it to him for free. The Gemara says, so what do you do? Well, now he doesn't want to give it to me for free. The Gemara says, no, you're mavliya de me'esrik belulav, which means buy the lulav for $40, and then it's going to be, he's not going to be so stupid to say, I can't do that. He'll say, okay, $40 for the lulav and give me the esrik free. So it's a little different than my example with Shabbos. Again, I'm seeing that the way Rashi's learning it is that Yimker lulav beyoiker ad sheyitin like esrig b'batana, sell the lulav more until he gives him the esrig as a gift. So which means that we're basically, it's the same thing as the way we understood the Mishnah. It's just the way the understanding in the Mishnah was, you're asking him to give you the esrig for free. That's what you asked him for. He said no. So then you say, no, I'm going to give you the answer. The Gemara says, well, there is a way to really do it that he shouldn't say no, is if you're giving him the exact amount and you're just telling him, now you can give me the esrig free, right? I'm paying you the $40 for the lulav. Could you now give it to me? So not exactly mavliya. The example I gave was a little wrong, The way Rashi's learning it is that your mavliya, it means that you sell you include it in the lulav itself. It's not that I'm paying for the whole package, including the esrog, $40. No, I'm paying just for the lulav, but I'm paying you $40. Now what are you going to complain about? Give me the esrog free. Yeah, okay, we're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rebbe.